Friday, February 27th. So, yesterday, NPR or Minnesota Public Radio News published a great interview with ICE Academy trainer Ryan Schwank, whose testimony I covered on Tuesday. It is a great watch. It's a great way to get the most salient points of his testimony, but presented in a logical order without any congressional grandstanding. One quote from the interview that I don't remember from the testimony was, "At the end of the day, I had to measure. Am I making more of a difference with these individual officers I can talk to, or by telling the world what was happening?" Ultimately, the answer was it was worth telling the world what was happening over keeping trying to patch a broken system from the inside. I can relate to that quote. It kind of struck a chord with me, albeit on a much smaller scale. I wouldn't call myself a whistleblower per se, but it felt sentimentally pretty similar to when I told my coworkers in a large format meeting what was happening here in Minnesota back in January. I was met by or with some small support from individuals, but honestly, it paled in comparison to the disbelief or just apathy from the organization at large. I think it's natural or even expected for a sense of that small scale to feel defeating. In some senses, when I'm summarizing or highlighting parts of the news that I feel are important, I'm really just editorializing, but at a microscopic scale. I do think, though, that it helps me to think through the process of editing in a couple meanings of the word. So, first is the production editing of each video, the words that I'm going to say, the order in which I structure my thoughts to the webcam, and which and how many bits I end up chopping out in order to make my presentation more fluid and concise. That sort of production editing has actually come in handy in a real world scenario this week outside of just creating video logs. I've been working with the resolution subcommittee within my local DFL Senate district, and the work we've been doing within that committee is largely administrative. We are taking all of the resolutions that people have written out and submitted and passed within their local caucuses, and we are consolidating and doing a bit of editing to make those resolutions that people have passed and voted on consolidated, concise, and part of the ongoing DFL platform while preserving each of their original intent. I've enjoyed my time volunteering with that group. I have no shortage of experience helping well intentioned groups of people use technology effectively. And that's precisely to me what this effort feels like. I've been pretty assertive in helping to do first passes, help to organize, take a look at the work to figure out how we can effectively distribute it in the limited number of meetings that we have with the volunteers that show up. I definitely feel appreciated for doing so. I got called a rock star last night for really leaning in and keeping that group on track. And I probably have better rock star hair now than I have at any point in the past when I've been called that same thing on projects at work. So I'm also aware of editing in the sense that I get to choose what topic or topics to focus on each day. It is rather lovely to be able to do that completely independently. I don't feel any pressure to necessarily focus on a specific agenda or topic each day. And I really get to feel or focus on either what I feel is the most important or sometimes just what I need or just want to talk through as a human rather than, some editor of a major news network. So practicing the skill and I've taken in probably a dozen or more potential directions for each video does, however, make me pretty acutely aware and more wary of the current mainstream media landscape. More specifically, my concern focuses on the Paramount Skydance media monopoly. This is a company that 6 months ago merged to put the Paramount brand, including CBS News, under the control of David Ellison. Skydance, you probably haven't heard of too much, but the long and short of it is the people with obscene amounts of money are just buying and consolidating media companies and under the blessing of the FCC because they'll just tell the public whatever the FCC, under the direction of the current federal administration, wants them to hear. It's important to note that David Ellison is the same guy who controls TikTok. And the big news from today is that they are looking to acquire CNN. So CBS, under editor-in-chief Barry Weiss, has been extremely worrying. So this has been over the past 6 months of coverage from that network. The sane washing of the events here in Minnesota over the past couple of months is infuriating as somebody on the ground here who highly values truth and keeping important things in perspective. And I would argue that the suppression of stories that should make or keep front page news is kind of full on propaganda territory. Yesterday, for example, there was an article with confirmation of the death of a nearly blind refugee who spoke no English, who was dropped off by Customs and Border Protection at a closed coffee shop miles away from his house in Buffalo, New York, in the dead of winter with no ability to get in contact with anybody. There's a group here called Haven Watch that has volunteers stationed outside of the detainment building here in Minneapolis, as detainees have been routinely ejected without winter clothes or without, clothes, phones, or other personal effects. The Haven Watch volunteers will then, work with them to get them to a safe spot. I only saw notification of the death of this man in Buffalo, New York, on a small footnote, bottom right, little screenshot and description on the CBS front page yesterday. And in contrast, today, an entire tab in the top left, and that's really where our eyes gravitate towards in a modern screen when you're trying to read something. An entire category is dedicated to Bill Clinton deposition. So it's important to take into account that while there is still some shred of journalism left at CBS, the link I've put to the article about the man who died is still there. The truth is heavily suppressed, and it's the editorialization, the way that they present these stories with knowledge of how people consume media in both an internet and even app-focused world. These stories are consistently presented in such a way to overall present that everything is still normal and that the economy is good. So a lot of the same denial and messaging that you hear from the Oval Office. I think that CNN has been historically, at least over the past 6 months, less guilty of this. Instead, I would consider CNN guilty mostly of constant sensationalization to keep 24-hour news coverage as a standard. But as we see an active media monopoly converge here with full support of the FCC, all people who consume news on any of these platforms, CBS, CNN, frankly, any mainstream media platform, everybody needs to first find additional sources, make sure that you are not getting all of your news from the same place and that you are checking multiple different places to get a full assortment of the truth. And really, really do put an additional layer of scrutiny, not only on the context or on the content that's being presented, but also on the way it is being presented. Look at the context of other news sources, what's presented in the highest profile slots. If you are going to be doing anything like getting your main source of news from the front page of like a CNN or CBS or any other mainstream commercial news source.